Our world is changing. More people. More demand for power. But to combat the growing threat of climate change, this power must be compatible with net zero carbon emissions. At Rolls-Royce, we believe in the positive transforming potential of technology to meet this challenge. We pioneer the power that matters, power that is central to the successful functioning of the modern world, operating in some of the hardest parts of the global economy to decarbonize. We have a crucial role to play in enabling the industries we support achieve the breakthroughs needed to reach net zero. Shaping not only the way we travel, but how we power our buildings, how we protect ourselves, and even how we produce energy. There is no one single solution to combating climate change. It's going to take everyone. We have already pledged to achieve net zero carbon emissions from our own operations by 2030. But we are now going even further. The solutions we are creating today will help the industries we support achieve the technology breakthroughs they need to become net zero carbon by 2050, accelerating the global transition to net zero, creating a brighter future for all by pioneering the power that matters for the world of tomorrow.
And so we come to that moment where we have the chief executives in front of us. You all know Michael, Luis, Carsten and Johan. And today we are joined, very pleased, by the EU Transport Commissioner, Adina-Ioana. Commissioner, why did you agree to come and face the CEOs?
They are my friends.
Really?
Yes, well, of course. We are in this together. We have to work together to deliver whatever is necessary for the aviation industry, for our people, for the customers, for the employees, huge number of jobs, and a very essential service for our society. So we have to work together to make the best out of it.
And when they say that the Commission doesn't listen, that the Commission doesn't necessarily respond, what are you going to tell them?
They know very well that I'm always listening and we are discussing. And that's not the first time we see each other. And going through so many unexpected events with such a huge impact on aviation sector, I'm proud to say that we have been engaged a lot, and at least on our part, we try to deliver as much as possible to support the industry during various crises.
Michael, are you going to be diplomatically nice since we have the Commissioner here?
Innately nice. I don't need to be diplomatically nice. The question was a slightly unfair one on the Commission. I think the Commission, both under Commissioner Vălean and Henrik Holloløy, have been very good listeners. I think they've been very good supporters of our industry. The blockages that we've raised this morning have not been with the Commission. Most of the blockages are with the European governments, and it's the European governments that are holding up the urgent reforms our industry need.
Which governments?
I'd start with the French, and add in the German, and the Irish have nothing to write home about either. We really struggle to persuade our national governments that there are urgent areas for reform, ATC, reform of EU 261. There are urgent reforms that will immeasurably improve the lives of our customers and our citizens across Europe. And I think the recent events in Ukraine have shown the need for Europe must work harder to protect and defend the free movement of people. Flying to and from Ukraine was removed at 3 a.m. on the 24th of February. it can be taken away. And I think we've become too complacent in Europe over the last 20, 30 years. But I would hold no criticism of Commissioner Vălean, Henrik Holloway, or their teams. They are very good listeners and I think very good supporters.
And give you the chance, before we come to the rest of the panel, I just want to give you the chance to repeat your statement that you will be the first airline back to Ukraine.
Yes, we'll be the first one back into Ukraine as soon as it's safe to do so. We were the last one out and we'll be the first ones back in.
On this question of Ukraine, Carsten, what it has shown is the fragility, in one sense, that we had taken so much for granted over the last few decades, but it all disappeared, and the fragility of the piece just disappeared overnight. Aviation, once again, both affected, but as Michael says, able to be one of those to help.
I think coming from my home country, Germany, we're even more particular in this. We have taken all the upsides of globalization in the last years, right? Including my company, going to China, being on the global stage. Made in Germany is a brand which we use not only in cars, blah, blah, blah. But we forgot that that is not given for nothing. And with our very specific history, we were hiding behind other countries when it came to security. We then put energy on the same logic. So I think Germany has learned more within days and weeks in that regard, or not learned in terms of academic learning, but it had to adjust its way of looking at things more in a few days than in decades before. And that wake-up call, I think Henry used that term this morning, the wake-up call, as sad as the, of course, occasion of this, and not just sad, terrible it is, I think the world will be a little different afterwards. And we as aviation might even take advantage of that in terms of more valuing, or there will be more valuing of what we do.
Do you think that's a realistic concept? Because the industry is, and I'm aware that for today's discussion we have all the CEOs, the major CEOs. The industry has been under attack in many, a poor choice of words in bearing in mind the circumstances, but you know what I mean. The industry has been under attack by its critics for some time, and this is giving an opportunity to remind people the importance of connectivity.
I think we should do my best to it myself. I mentioned the number before already. Every day we would be sitting here without the war. 4,000 people on Lufthansa alone would be going back and forth, Russia, Ukraine, and then in our business model usually to places beyond. And these people are not connecting now while we speak. And there must be thousands on Ryanair and IAG, and we're just whatever, X% of the market. All these interactions are now falling away. And that indeed is something which we always need to remind ourselves. And unfortunately, you know, we all know it's much easier to get people aggressive about other people when you don't know them. And aviation helps us to know other cultures, which makes it more difficult to get people, you know, negative about some other people. I think so. Believe that strongly.
Luis, on a more basic level, though, it's going to affect you if fuel prices do not come down. We are talking about serious implications for aviation and ultimately higher prices for consumers. Luis.
Yes, I think we are having three impacts because of the Ukraine situation. First of all is the fuel price. I think we have different situations in the different companies because of the different hedging policies. Other aspect we are looking very carefully is the different point of sales, because at the end to have a war in Europe can affect, for example, US point of sale, that at the end they can decide to go to other places. And I think other aspect is impacting us in a lower level than others, is for the length of the flights to go to Asia. We are in some way lucky because the capacity of IAG to Asia, even in 2019, was only 8% of our capacity. And right now we can fly to all the destinations we are flying, adding maximum half an hour more of flight. So I think because...
I mean, that's the BA flight that goes to Haneda that sort of has to go this way instead of going that way.
Yeah.
But if you look at the JAL flight that goes from Haneda to London, I mean, it's going west and over the top, taking 3.5 hours more to make that flight.
Yes, it's not our case, but we understand talking these days with Topi, with Finnair CEO, for them the impact is huge. And for us, still is something that we can cope with. Even we had some destinations that we were not flying because of the COVID policy in China, for example. So Japan is something we are considering if we come back and when, but we are not so impacted as others.
Johan, are we looking at higher prices? And I'm aware of the competitive necessity to be careful on these direct grounds, since we have all the CEOs on the table. But as an industry overall, are we looking at higher fuel prices, therefore higher prices?
Well, at easyJet, you can always find very attractive fares. Oh. But anyway, having said that, just for the record, no, look, we talk a lot about, for the good reasons also, the fuel prices and the inflationary cost there. But don't forget also, there's not one of us or any airline in Europe who hasn't also done a lot of things to become more efficient throughout this pandemic, reducing cost and we took out over $500 million in 21, almost half of that going to be sustainable. And, we will also work on continuous efficiency progress to make sure that we can mitigate some of these costs coming in. But also, you take a look at the fuel. I mean, it goes up and down so much. I don't know what jet fuel is today, but 11.50 or something, that if you're buying out further out, it drops down as well. So we are in a peak right now. I think that one of the beautiful things about this industry for consumers is the competitiveness and the dynamics that exist in there. So you will always going to be able to find affordable fares.
Are you a hedger?
Yes.
Are you a hedger?
Absolutely.
Do you hedge?
Yes.
Michael, do you hedge?
80% to March 2023.
So you all hedge right up into the future, which means you're gaining this year and lose next year, essentially.
There's no money in hedging. It's only taking out volatility.
Sorry?
There's no money making in hedging. It only takes out volatility.
I mean, having said that, we were also hedging prior to COVID.
Yeah.
And,
You lost then, didn't you?
Bloody sure we lost.
Sure.
Yes.
Very expensive lessons.
The bank always wins, though.
You're in their own business.
But this is more fun.
Did you really just say that?
No other industry would employ us.
Or lose as much money as consistently over so many years. Okay, let's turn to the industry. Commissioner, you're listening to what they're saying in terms of what they want. Now, let's reverse this. What do you want from the industry?
Well, listen, of course, I'm acquainted with all the topics, so they were already raised here. So single European sky, so how we fly more efficient. This was the first file I concentrated on and put it forward. And I had so high hopes because it makes so much sense. And indeed, I'm still amazed how it's possible that the government, transport minister, does not recognize that and put it in place. It's no brainer.
Single European skies?
Single European sky, yes. And there are examples. It's not like a theory or something abstract. You can look at the Maastricht upper area, how it works, and you can see how efficient it can be if you can put your resources together.
So why doesn't it?
Come on. I think there is, dear traffic management people, I do believe they are very reluctant towards change. And maybe they don't understand this change correctly, and maybe it's not explained to them correctly, and maybe the authorities are not courageous enough to make the push.
Courageous? In other words, they're frightened of their own domestic unions. They're frightened of their own domestic market.
You said that.
Well, yeah, because so you said to me earlier, how much fuel will you save on European SES?
15%.
We believe 10.
Yes, 10 plus. Yeah.
10%?
Right. So there's an immediate 10% saving on fuel.
And CO2.
Well, relevant term, you see, CO2 leading, fuel to CO2
yeah.
of 10 to 15%, and they won't do it. Why do you think they won't, Carsten?
I think unions play a huge role, but I am afraid with Ukraine, the issue of protecting your own airspace, blah, 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 military playing a bigger role, might even make it more difficult rather than easier. So, as I said before, I think the CO2 argument is a very heavy new argument we need to use more. probably the military conflict will a little bit work against this topic for some time, for those who want to use it as an argument. But again, the CO2 argument is so large, how can we not use that more than we have in the past, I think?
I spoke to, by coincidence, I didn't look him up, but a general within one of the air forces in Europe, and he said, I said, look, is this really about the security issues of the borders and the control? And it's not. It's a little bit easy for people to say that, because the moment we believe that something happens, we close down the airspace. We can take that decision any point in time. So, you got to think to the point that we should not give up on this argument, because what goes for us this time is actually sustainability. And the topic of sustainability, and the need to do something in there, rightly so. This is one of the biggest things that we can do short term. And as I said before, that some of those governments and some of those people who points the fingers at this industry to be slow to move something, they are themselves blocking this, and on contrary find more enthusiasm by increasing ticket taxes that does nothing to decarbonize what we're doing. It is quite frankly shameful.
And I think we need to be even more aggressive on using this as undermining the position of those who are criticizing us, as you said today.
When you say you need to be more aggressive, what does that translate to in reality?
Well, unfortunately, in a democracy, this topic is very much a communication topic. And I think those who are asking us to do more, to do faster, to even drop flights, we need to tell them, hey, how can you ask for this if at the same time you are basically not even doing the minimum thing to get those 10%? I think it undermines authority. I love chocolate, and that makes it very difficult for me to tell my kids not to eat chocolate, because they always tell me, Daddy, you're eating it yourself. And that's a little bit how we have to approach this. How can they put pressure on us, certain politicians, when they are not willing to do their own part of getting this topic solved? So I think we have to use it in that, whatever you want to call it.
Dangerous territory here, Carsten, because you'll have to name and shame. That's essentially what you're talking about. If you're talking about dealing with politicians, you're talking about eventually naming and shaming.
Well, we did today, didn't we? We did. I mean, Johan, Michael, I hope I did. What more can we do? There's no better audience than this.
But there's something, and we discussed this yesterday and this morning as well, that I think that there's also a need for us to consider to be more directive to consumers about the benefit of what we're doing.
How to do that?
Well, that's one of the things you have to work out, how you effectively communicate to a large part of the customer group who's been grown up with the connectivity and affordable fares that they can be able to travel. Speaking about not taking things for granted. If ticket taxes are introduced and it becomes more and more expensive, and connectivity is not, incentivized to that extent, this generation will see that what they used to be are not able to be doing in the future, and then I think they're going to miss it. But by that time, I think, the train would have left the station.
No, I think the problem is that we have the focus on the airlines, but the airlines, we are doing everything that we have in our hand to solve this situation. So we have commitments to have net CO2 emissions in 2050. We are investing in new aircraft that even after the crisis, with a huge amount of debt that we have, the level of capex that everybody has is huge, because we want the latest technology, because we want to reduce the fuel consumption, the CO2 emissions. We are saying yes to Corsia, we are saying yes to ETS, we are saying yes to SAF, but we don't have SAF. We are saying yes to the hydrogen aircraft of the future. We are investing in all the new technologies that we have right now. But at the end, we have the focus. It looks like we are the ones, we are not doing anything. But we are not responsible of the single European sky, for example. And it's something that is very easy to do. And to
you're getting you're getting all the blame, and you're doing as much as you can. Is that what you're saying?
In some way, yes. I think we are doing everything is in our hand. But we are here to try to see if there are other solutions, and we are here to help.
Michael, you're the whipping boy, which I find that a truly awful thought after lunch.
I don't think so. Look, in the case of Ryanair, we're investing 20 billion in new aircraft technology for the next 5 years. These planes will fly 4% more passengers, but they burn 15% less fuel. We are making, as an industry, huge investments in new technology to make the services we provide more environmentally friendly.
So why consistently is the industry regarded as one of the worst polluters? And everybody in this room knows the statistic of 2 or 3%, depending on which model you're using on any particular day. Why is that the case?
Because I think there's been a degree of misinformation, and as an industry, I don't think we have fought back robustly enough, pointing out the fact that aviation accounts for 2% of Europe's CO2 emissions. The one that always amazes me is shipping accounts for 4%. It's twice. But Sky are never going to show you global warming with a ferry chugging out of the port. It's always some contrails of an aircraft taking off. Look, oh, you can see the globe warming up as we speak. No. But we are in doing everything we can. I think we do need to be more robust in pushing back on some of this. I think we do have a supporter in Commissioner Vălean. Henrik Holloway is blue in the face going around advocating the case of aviation. But we also need to call out governments. It is transport ministers. You don't need to name them. Just take whichever transport minister there is. Why have you not done 2 simple things? 1, bring forward the single European sky proposals, or 2, the starting one should be protect overflights during national strikes. Now there's an area where Europe does have some degree of confidence. We do have a single market, and yet French air traffic controllers will close the entire centre of the European market on Fridays and Sundays repeatedly during the summer season. There's the starting point for that reform. That is still a national competence, and we accept that, but we have to embarrass these people into it.
Oh, there you are. You've just put your finger on the third rail, as they say in America. You have to embarrass them. Are you prepared to embarrass people?
No, I don't embarrass people. I wanted to jump in this thing because I think it's an essential debate. Why is aviation the focus point of everyone who thinks decarbonization? Because it's indeed. Yesterday, I had to attend young people roundtables on how to improve rail, and all they could speak about was how to move people from aviation to rail because of the emissions. And I said, no, aviation is not the sector with the highest emissions of CO2. You have road, you have maritime, come on. Oh, really? They were like discovering new information. So indeed, there is a focus on aviation. And I think in a way they are the victims of their own success because everyone knows and loves aviation, so it's very visible. And then it is an ideological approach towards what to decarbonize first.
There's a question for you that's come via Slido. And by the way, take as many Slido questions as arrive, I will take. So whether in the room or otherwise, or in the room, you can put your hand up and if you're in the room and you've got a question, catch my eye, as they used to say about Mr. Speaker, and we'll have that. Commissioner, SAF is one of the most important pillars to decarbonize aviation in the short and medium term. How can we make SAF in Europe affordable?
Well, first we have to make SAF available.
Isn't that two sides of the same coin?
First we have to have SAF, and then let's see how expensive and affordable it's going to be, and what mechanisms, market mechanisms, can be put in place so that this will be taken up by the industry.
Is it your view that SAF can be made in sufficient quantities for aviation? Because the availability is the issue at the moment. But Carsten, can it be made, whether in the different types of algae, or waste management, or cooking oil, or whatever?
Our view is, with our academic partners, biofuel can be scaled to a certain degree, but eventually not to what we need. Power to fuel basically can be scaled endlessly, but not in Europe. You need to go where you have sufficient green energy, which eventually is solar, wind, but probably too expensive, so it's thermal energy and solar. So that needs to be done in other parts of the world, but this is a huge infrastructure project no company can do alone. This is a government topic.
But is it feasible? You've all done SAF flights. You've all run an engine or the plane or whatever is on SAF. But nobody is being able to tell me that there can be SAF on a large scale. Everybody says it's simply not feasible yet.
Well, we are going to need it. I mean, it is one of those. First of all, I mean, we're going to need all the the techniques that are on the table today, whether that is SAFs or whether that is hydrogen, for zero emissions technology. But you asked the question: is it feasible? Well, you got to put it up against what the alternative is. If the alternative is that you will see less connectivity, less mobility, or that flying will only turn the clock back before the deregulation, that it was something that only available for rich and the privileged, it's a huge cost attached to that. So what we need to see is from governments that there also is a direct investments into these capacities in order to produce the complete degree. First of all, to make sure that the supply is actually there to make a difference. And by that time, prices will then also come down. But today, I mean, the biofuel is, was 4 times the last time I checked, more expensive than the kerosene that is out there. It's one thing to say, well, we have it available, you could use it up to 50%, but if you put that cost, transfer it into the prices, who's going to fly?
Well, it depends, because if we will have enough volumes and scale up the production of SAFs, then their price, in theory, will go down, or comparing with the kerosene price. So then,
but how long is it going to take to do that? And here's a question, by the way. A number of EU member states are introducing their own SAF mandate targets, which will create distortions.
That I disagree with that, and I spoke with each of them having this idea, because now we have these scarce volumes, and what we try to do is give a harmonized approach to it, because it's the waterbed effect. If someone goes very high, it would be enough. They listened, and to be honest, I think I had some success on this one. And then there is this absurd idea going around that at this stage we have the technology to 100% blend, which is not true. For commercial purpose, it's not possible. So if you explain and engage, I think the people will understand. We have to take it very slow with this. So give the right signal that it is going to be demand. This would be in order to trigger or to increase the production of these alternative fuels, but take it slow and gradually, because you don't want to put pressure immediately on the industry to increase the prices, as you're saying.
But you're trying to do 2 incompatible things at the same time. You're trying to take it slow, so that you don't put the necessary pressures on. But at the same time, the world is crying out and beating you up because you're not moving fast enough. So, Michael, which is it?
I think there's a danger we get distracted. Look, we all support the production of SAFs, but the Commissioner is correct. There isn't an availability, and for the foreseeable future, 5-10 years, SAFs are not going to account for a very significant part of our fuel consumption. Nevertheless, in the immediate future, with reform of ATC, you could reduce fuel consumption by somewhere between 10 and 15%, much more dramatic and a much more immediate prize than SAFs. We're investing in new technology that are delivering 10 to 15% fuel consumption reduction. I mean, you put the 2 of those together, you could be at 30% less fuel, 90% fewer flight delays in the next 5 years. So the SAF debate is important, but it's in some senses theoretical. We're all investing in research, we're all investing in production. But let's not take our eyes.
Is it a red herring? Is it a red herring that's allowing everybody to be distracted because from other changes?
Trust me, look, oil's $110 a barrel at the moment. No one's distracted. We're all committed to SAFs, but SAFs are not going to deliver this kind of radical change in the next 5 to 10 years that ATC reform and investment in already existing new engine technologies will deliver. We could deliver 30% lower oil consumption, 30% reduction in environmental emissions in the next 5 to 10 years with ATC reform and new technology.
No, I just think this is a dangerous maybe topic in a public debate, but this issue of SAF or of aviation contribution to pollution has almost become sacred, that you cannot talk about the engineering and physical backgrounds of it. Exactly. And we had that, for example, in Germany before the elections. It was all about turning the whole world into renewables and shutting off nuclear power plants and shutting off coal power plants and gas power plants. It only took, 5 days of realism that the same politicians are now on very basic topics, probably including extension of nuclear power plants. So part of it, not the intelligence has gone up in that speed. Intelligence was there before, but it was just not possible to talk about it in public. Like there are some topics you would never bring up at a dinner party because we're all kind of well behaved and you don't do it. The dinner party level of this topic has become too low. I think we have to overcome certain inhibitions to be honest to each other again. What physics can do, what physics cannot do, where it makes sense to use other forms of energy, where it doesn't make sense. I think this really has to create some new transparency and honesty. And unfortunately, the current energy situation in Europe in that regard will help. I'm very much convinced.
Okay.
Yes, but without that, which is part of a basket of measures, because of course we are promised also a technological evolution from the industry of producers of technologies for aircraft. Apart from that, there is only taxation. So we have to look, if we discuss on the emissions and the Paris Agreement and everything, what we have? By one hand, we have to put a price on carbon. On the other hand, to have an industrial solution as low as it is. So we have to see what's a good balance in between.
I want to move on to I want to go back to the pandemic and what we've learned in the sense that throughout the pandemic, governments listened but didn't seem to respond favorably when airlines said, don't shut borders, do this, don't do that, don't do the other. Luis, the assistance given, but the failure to adapt to what airlines were asking was fairly painful to watch. The airlines seem to lose on every issue.
I think it's easy to talk now that I hope COVID is past. I think it was a difficult situation for everybody. It was new. And I think what we always said is that we need to follow the recommendation from the scientific community and the people that they know about health. But what we have seen a lot is political decisions that, from my point of view at least, didn't have also the result that they wanted to achieve. So maybe now we have a new pandemic, and we were talking about that this morning. I think we need to learn from this. Closing borders and all the restrictions that we put didn't avoid the spread of the virus. And even in different countries with different policies, the situation is very similar.
Right, but the interesting thing about the closing of the borders point is that when Omicron came along, everybody was very quick to close the borders, despite the fact they'd had 18 months of this, and one would have thought, would have learned from previous examples. So the call to say don't close the borders wasn't heeded.
Yes, it's depressing. It's unacceptable. It is. There's no other way of putting it. I mean, there has been study after study in the recent past, before the Omicron happened, that, for instance, testing is a pretty useless tool in combating the
so what would you do instead?
No, we live in a, you take UK as an example. You know, there was a narrative by certain groups that we should do more like they do in Australia, completely shut it down and follow the New Zealand. But there are more lorry drivers coming into the port of Dover in 3 days that's coming into Australia in a whole period of a month. It's impossible. It doesn't look like that. So you have to accept that this is something that will be spread around. So then you look at to say, well, how much can I slow down the spread in order to set up the system to be able to cope with it? And I think that's where the arguments then ended up with. But, you know, you take UK as an example, as I mentioned earlier, that they were the quickest one to shut down, you know, travel from South Africa. You know, so it was 3 days after it was discovered. You know, it took 2 weeks, and UK had the largest, you know, rate of infections of Omicron. It just says itself. So, I mean, one of the things right now is to make sure that the contingency plan we need to work on is that when the next variant of concern will come out, which it will, and you will have some alarmists, you will have some scientists out to say this is going to be the bad one, that you got to go by the facts and the science that is there to actually make sure we don't do the unnecessary thing. Because if you do that,
have any...
Sorry, can I finish?
Yeah, sure.
If you do that, you're also fooling the system to think that you in one way or other have sorted it out. Never mind the consequences of the isolation that has been as part of this.
Do you have any confidence, Michael, any confidence that, God forbid, when the next variant or the next new pandemic comes along, they won't rush back to the same old solutions?
I think we've learned from the last 2 years. I think the Omicron has been a useful learning experience too, in that locking down was completely ineffective. The South Africans were out in the first week of December actually telling the world that this was more virulent but a lot less damaging, and we didn't listen. I think we will learn again. I think it is becoming harder for European governments to shut down, even in the face of health scares. But I do think it re-emphasises the point we've made repeatedly as A4E, is that one of the critical freedoms that European brings is the freedom of movement of people.
Commissioner, if we look back over the pandemic, there was, in my view, a spectacular failure in the early and middle part of the pandemic for coordinated policies by governments. Despite the fact every single person said there needs to be coordinated policies by governments, and repeatedly they kept saying it, meanwhile going off in opposite directions and all doing different things.
Yes, indeed, you're right.
Why was that, and how can that be avoided next time?
This is the reflex usually on home affairs, emergency, because all of these are very much under subsidiarity rules. So everyone had its own idea and needed to show its own people that they are doing something maybe even better than others. Now we are here talking aviation, but I think the shock was when we had the closure of borders and thousands of trucks stuck there. So then everyone understood, okay, we need to cooperate because we open this border, then we stop in the next one and in the next one. So the terrestrial thing was really shocking. We came up with this green lanes concept, which is now so easy to understood. Everyone is applying it. It's like it's there forever and is going to stay. So there are lessons learned here. And for aviation, I think what I followed as much as possible all the time with all the decision-making people, and this is especially health authorities, very hard to work with them. It was, whatever you say, it has to be something harmonized. So the same thing everywhere, especially for an industry how it is aviation. So that's how we came up with this digital certificate, which is, I would say, a success. It simplifies things. We have even outside Europe 60 other countries joining the program.
Right.
So, yeah, so this is easier.
Okay, I want you to answer this question. It's on the Slido, by the way, slido.com. What is the single biggest challenge facing European airlines in 2022 or beyond? We haven't heard from anybody there, but what's your view on what it is? Is it COVID recovery, geopolitics, for which we can add in Ukraine, etc., climate change, or competitiveness?
Well, all of the above. I would say we have a sum of everything here this year, because we don't know yet, well, you know probably for each of your company or for the association, what are the recurring effects of the COVID crisis. Climate change is very high on the public agenda and politicians' agenda. Geopolitics is Ukraine war.
I didn't want you to see the results of the public. I wanted to hear your views first to see if you're in agreement. Okay, so Carsten, do you agree? The single biggest challenge is climate change, is what the public says, or what our guests say, versus geopolitics, COVID, or competitive. Oh no, COVID's going up at the back.
Even though I'm not a native speaker, I think it should say and beyond. If it says or beyond, there surely is a different answer for 22 than for the years beyond. In 22, I think it will be COVID recovery. Beyond 22, it will be climate change.
Oh, well spotted. Well, yes, you're right. So 2022, we'll allow you two there. 2022.
COVID recovery.
And, yes. Luis? You could take it the same way that Carsten has.
No, I think it's similar. I think in the short term, in our case, for example, last year we were losing 3 billion euros. So we need to come back to where we were in 2019. So we still need to do a lot of things to be more efficient. And we are going to have a lot of headwinds. And one of the biggest headwinds is going to be the climate change.
Do you agree?
No, I think the results are rubbish. If it's for 2022, climate change is not the single biggest challenge. I mean, the single biggest challenge is COVID recovery. What's going to happen?
We always agree, don't we?
What's going to happen?
This is very worrying.
What's going to happen in Ukraine? And you know, as an industry, we're facing extraordinary inflation. If oil price, I mean, if the Ukraine situation spirals and oil prices, energy prices, I mean, Europe could be facing energy rationing this winter. You know, so with the greatest respect, climate change, certainly for this year, over the medium term, yes, climate change, and we've already addressed that in some considerable detail.
But isn't the interesting thing about that, isn't that exactly the point why so little progress is made on some of the bigger climate change issues? Because there's not the urgency of tomorrow. There's the urgency that you just said then, Michael, over the medium term. And as long as it remains over the medium term, things like CES and emissions trading can all get kicked off.
No, well, they don't. I mean, we are investing, we were investing $20 billion in new aircraft that are getting delivered over the next 4 years that reduce our fuel consumption by 14%. This is not an industry.
That's profitability as well, Michael. That's profitability.
It isn't. It's about an environmental commitment to start with. I mean, if you wanted profitability, you'd fly older aircraft that would be significantly cheaper. This is an industry that is tackling climate change on a daily basis. But if the question is what's the single biggest challenge facing us, it is without doubt COVID recovery. We were looking at a boom Christmas. Omicron emerges in the last week of November and Christmas falls over. Easter looks fantastic, whoopity, and then Putin invades Ukraine and it falls over again. You know, in the short term for the remainder of this year, we face extraordinary challenges on geopolitical COVID recovery. Will the airports be able to handle the passengers we're sending through those airports? We're seeing significant pinch points at the moment at many airports around Europe, around security staffing, baggage handling. You know, there are lots of real challenges facing us just restoring this business back to where it was 2 years ago. And those are that's the biggest challenge certainly facing us in the next 5-6 months.
So do you feel, and in your individual ways, I can see you're agreeing with Michael, but do you then feel that you are, I don't say powerless to influence these other issues, but certainly frustrated at the inability, at the fact that you're always at the wind and mercy of these other issues?
No, hang on here. I mean, the COVID-19 recovery is a good challenge to have. It's customers coming back. We are putting pressure on the system. The airports, the ground handlers, the ATC system, because customers are coming back. You know, we always, we thought that, I said, look, it's going to be a period, we were grounded for 11 weeks. It's about survival. After that, it's going to be a period of recovery, which we're coming into right now. Then it's going to be a period of growth. And you can argue where one end is going to start the other. It's a good thing to have the challenge now to actually get on to the type of calls you would normally have before the pandemic. Oh, we got a massive of people over there. We got queues at the airports. We have all that. That is good. Customers are coming back. Can I just say also on the point, and I agree completely with Michael on this, on the sustainability that it will be. Just because it isn't, happening today, actions needs to be taken today. We signed up through the Destination 2050 roadmap as the first, group of airlines on any continent in the world, because we know that this is a roadmap where actions has to start and have started earlier as well. So just because it is not that is the most important challenge we have today, and I would still argue we all think it is a very important thing to do, the work needs to happen right now to get us where we want to do. But the recovery, it's a great thing. I love having operational meetings right now when we can talk about the things that, look, we have too much customers in the system and that ground handlers can't do that. Great, let's sort it out. And there was a narrative among some people, it hasn't even been brought up throughout this day, but the last time we met, will people come back and ever travel again to the same extent before 2019? We know now, not only are they doing it, they're traveling more. And in some cases where the debate was about flight shame, they are traveling more. They are traveling more. So what are you going to make out of that? I don't think we're in a bad place at all about that. Now it's about looking after them and make sure we give them a great experience.
Commissioner, is it not, this is a question, is it not time, I'm going to ask it because I know that the rest of you will all join in, is it not time to make progress on reforming EU 261 passenger rights? Unclarity in the rules leads to so much extra costs, burdens and confused passengers? This question comes from Johan, Carsten, Luis, and Michael.
Passengers need to have rights, strong rights, because passengers are also our friends. We like very much to have passengers, and to have passengers, we have to give them enough trust in our services to make them be with us. So
shall I just leave now and come back and see who's still standing at the end? All right, which one of you wants to take that?
No, I was going to say that I think if there is somebody that like our customers, is us, because it's our customers. It's the ones that make the company profitable and the ones that make the company to have a purpose. So we want to treat well the customers. That's what we do every morning when we wake up. But the thing is, the 261, even before COVID, was not fit for purpose. It was a regulation, I understand with the better of the intention, that didn't reflect the reality that we have in an airline. But after COVID, what we have said is that it's even worse, because it cannot, in some way, regulate a situation like this that we never expected.
Can I just ask,
it is very regulated.
Before you answer, Commissioner, anybody in this room actually made an EU 261 or UK 261 claim? Come on, don't be shy.
Against Singapore Airlines.
Not sure if that counts, but there we go, right. So there's also an entire industry, isn't there, that as soon as a flight is delayed by more than 3 hours, you get the emails from people like TripAdvisor and from TripIt telling you and inviting you to then just click on this and it will all happen for a 12% commission or 15% commission.
Remember, under EU 261, you also get the email from the airline advising you of what your rights are anyway. We do it ourselves. I think there is some prospect of hope here. I dread to mention the word Brexit and the shambles that the UK government have made of it, but they are looking at rewriting EU 261 in the UK with a much more sensible, logical kind of approach. You know, relating compensation to flight length, length of delay, not having this fixed sum that in many cases exceeds the airfare you originally paid anyway. And I think if the British were to introduce some sort of effective reform of that, it would put some pressure on the European Union to at least respond competitively and deliver that effective reform. It's been stuck for 9 years.
Commissioner, are you in favour of reforming 261?
Of improving 261, yes. Yes, we are looking at improving 261, but not in the sense, I mean, I want to be very clear because it's a wider public than just us looking at what we are saying. So whatever improvement we will do, it would be not in the line of diminishing the passenger rights. It has to be a fair contract, respected between a service provider and the customer. This is, I would say, the main thing. Then, of course, we have to clarify some things of, I don't know, protect the customer in front of liquidity crisis or...
Yeah, I've been doing this job long enough to know to interpret those words. So it will not diminish the rights. You're going to lose this one.
No, but listen, they are, because it's so badly written, there is a huge amount of uncertainty. What constitutes an extraordinary delay, as an example? So then that gets sent out to some court, and that court becomes precedent, and then that leads to something else or something. It's badly written. You know, people can't make up their mind what it stands for. First of all, clarification. And I think to your point, there's, as Luis was saying, that, look, we completely understand, you know, consumer rights and protection. We want to do what is reasonable and appropriate because we believe that in that way you're going to get customers to come back to you and you're going to be ultimately successful. But the fact is that this is such a badly written document you can't even interpret it. And it was based from 2009. Never took mass cancellations into consideration, and EU 261 were used throughout this pandemic.
Yes, indeed, but we have been able to put other instruments at the use of the industry to compensate the fact that it was an unprecedented thing. But indeed, you are right, and we have to work together on this one, because we never just do something. We have to consult with everyone on this thing and see what it is to be improved to make sure we'll have a better one, a better written one.
Do you think that'll happen before I retire?
Are you talking about single European sky or passengers' rights?
I wasn't planning on retiring that long ago. All right. Final question to all of you. Let's not diminish the fact that we are in the same place that we were a few years ago, face to face, enjoying personal company and the chance to actually break bread and argue about the same issues that we've been arguing about for the last 15 years with incremental improvements. But that's an achievement, Michael, isn't it?
I think it is, and it's the reason why demand is spiking back this summer. People want to go out and travel again. People want to meet again.
So as a result of the pandemic, what did you change in your bucket list? What is the one thing that you now really want to do?
For aviation?
No, in life.
In
life. What's the, you were faced with a pandemic. We are all at home, working from home, Zoom.
You know what? No, it's simple.
You're muted. So we all had that moment of introspection where we thought, damn it, I'm going to give it all up and I'm going to do. So for you, ma'am, I'm going to give it all up and do what? ...
Travel is the top of the list. So you see, that's
Where?
To the sun. A sunny place.
Ireland.
Ireland.
Do you know a good airline that can take you there?
I know several.
All right, so, Johan.
Oh, it's the same?
Johan, what?
I thought it was that question. Travel.
No, it is the same. What is your? It's my moment, my bucket. I don't want to do this forever. I want to do ...
Well, I hopefully can continue to do what I do and travel, which I used to do. Look, we all get the question sometimes, what has been the toughest thing out of this pandemic? And that's to be in lockdown, not being able to engage with people and see people and do what you normally did.
Right, so what's your change of ambition, do you think, as a result? The Commissioner wants to travel. Is there anything you're now burning to try to do? For me, it was to learn, what did I do during COVID? I learned how to become a barista and make a decent espresso. What did you do?
Look, there's so much sour bread that's been baked in my house on weekends, so I'm never going to bake another bread again in my entire life. I'm going to enjoy others to do it for me. That's one thing. That's the pleasure I want to start to enjoy. I'm going to do less cooking. I'm going to go more to restaurants because I do too much cooking on my own, and yeah.
Carsten.
I recall we were starting to drink rosé already at lunchtime. My wife and I realized if we keep doing this, we'll be ending up as alcoholics. So we drink a lot less rosé since COVID now.
You've gone for white instead. You saved the rosé for the evening. Luis.
I think at the end in this life what you have is experiences, and travel I think is one, if not the best, that you can have.
Where have you not been? If I was able to give you a ticket, bearing in mind he wasn't IAG, so that's not likely, but where have you gone?
Maybe a more serious answer. Our first class on the routes where we offer it is booked a lot higher than it was before COVID. People, and not by corporates, by private individual travelers. So
you must tell your wife to stop booking first class.
People are spending a lot more money on private travel now.
Yeah. This is the Commissioners. So, Luis, where would you go?
India.
Wow, wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
You've not been?
No.
Do you know an airline that goes to India?
Yes, I know one.
Lufthansa will take you there. First class, but even.
When I arrived to the world, it was the lockdown, so...
I'll have a word with somebody who might be able to get you a good seat at the back.
Okay.
Michael, more racehorses?
Absolutely not. My daughter is starring in the Peter Pan musical at 6 o'clock this evening, so What I've learned during COVID is to show up for my daughter's plays, be on time, and then I'm under strict instructions not to whistle loudly at her.
Have you got to get there by 6 o'clock?
At 6 o'clock this evening, I'll be gone here in about 1 minute's time, because I know that global warming is important, and I know that the geopolitical situation is important, but my daughter's Peter Pan show this evening at 6 o'clock is way more important than any of these issues.
The panel! Go! Go! The Eurostar awaits! Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Richard and our fantastic panel. We reckon have a short break now. We will be back here at 3:15. 3:15.